Well, thank you so much for joining us here on a Monday. I'm Marlon Bowling with you as we kick off a new trading week, and we go to the phones directly here and bring in Rich Nelson of Allendale Incorporated in McHenry, Illinois. All right, Rich, thanks for coming on board with us here as you generally help us kick off each trading day here. Today is no exception, and as we look first of all at the grain segment here, opening up a brand new trading week, I'm looking at the overnight trade. It looks like corn fairly flat, wheat fairly flat. Soybeans did go up about maybe, it looks like 4 or 5 cents here in the early hours this morning. So let's start with those. Why the firmness in the soybean trade here this morning versus the corn and wheat trade for now?
You know, the issue on the headlines will be the maybe concern about this Brazil situation. As it stands, they're going to get some rain here these next few days. Some people suggesting that this will still be below normal, and therefore maybe it's time to throw a small amount of concern into the mix here. I wonder, though, if perhaps this is just an issue where some people are watching the charts. You know, we are still in an uptrend on these soybeans, and this recent 20 to 30 cent break simply puts us right near support. And we did see that hit last night on some of the charts, so maybe that might be an issue there as well to look at beyond the Brazil situation.
So let me pose this question to you then. Last week we had a bit of a turnaround and a rally on the corn and the wheat trade early last week. They tried to sell it off later on, but it just kind of hit like a plateau there. Soybeans did not really participate at that time. Is this something where you think they're kind of evening up the spreads?
You know, I do think so, especially when you're hearing some kind of these background stories about still, in general, good demand for soybean demand from China, as well as some other buyers there as well. So, yeah, I do think this might be an issue, just like you mentioned there, that the trade will have to look at these next few days.
Looks like the commodity funds are actually in there selling corn and wheat again on Friday, but they were buying soybeans, and they were already net long soybeans anyway, weren't they?
They sure were, and especially for the corn side. This is actually 4 weeks in a row now of selling by the funds. If we wanted to find a positive note about it, we could look at the simple fact that prices, though, the price response, prices are actually higher from Tuesday to Tuesday, at least for corn, by almost about 3 cents in the face of that fund selling. So that might be an issue where perhaps it tells us yet again that this corn is just fine, staying right around the 350 mark here.
Well, later on today, USDA will release their crop progress and condition report, and that will, of course, include mainly these days harvest progress numbers. What are you guys looking for corn harvest progress and soybean harvest?
You know, last week we were at a very late pace, about 38%. This week we should cross that 50% mark without too much of a problem on the corn end. As far as soybeans, we were 70% done last week. You probably will see this number push up to just over 80% this week's numbers. As far as the winter replanting, that was 75% last week. On this one, you'll probably move right around that 85 to 87% range here.
Okay, now anything related to wheat that may actually have something to do with South American wheat production or not?
You know, as far as the South American discussion, not too much in today's trade ideas. The market is actually watching some news out of Saudi Arabia. They picked up about 484,000 tons of wheat over the weekend. Whether the U.S. gets a share of that, of course, is a separate question there.
Okay, and of course the commodity funds heavily net short on the wheat side there as well. Rich, if you don't mind, I'll bring you back, and we have a whole lot to talk about on the livestock trade as we get ready to open up that market here today. We're talking with Rich Nelson. We'll be back right after this. Well, we are talking with Rich Nelson right now of Allendale Incorporated. He is based in McHenry, Illinois. We covered the grain side. We're going to talk now about what to expect in the livestock trade. And, you know, we were talking about the weakness that we saw in the cattle markets and the hog markets as we headed into the weekend. The nearby contracts on live cattle were a little bit firmer Friday afternoon on the close. However, and I mean giant letters, however, there was something that really shook loose after the markets closed up last Friday, and it was the fact that we had some cash cattle trade that developed in the plains, and it just shocked everybody. That trade was said to be several dollars higher, I believe $6 to $8 higher on the live basis, $7 to $10 higher on a dress basis, and away she went. And now they seem to be talking a whole different story as we get ready to open up today on the cattle futures. Explain what's going on, can you?
Biggest issues going on were the surprising 118 to 119s traded here last week on, of course, that Friday, much above the average from the previous week of 111. And now, in fact, you've got to go back all the way into history, all the way back to the month of May to see anything close to this type of 1 week jump in prices. So we certainly had Packers scrambling quite a bit more than we expected. And as you mentioned here, we certainly did trade anything beyond what the market was even discussing here.
How is that possible to make that big of a move all at one time like that? I mean, were the Packers really that short bought, or what happened there?
I think the issue here is nobody really thought that Packers would have been that short bought. However, some of that recent data we saw in recent days, for instance, Thursday's weight data showed that we slipped yet again on the weight side compared with last year, now 2% under last year's numbers as far as weights. So on the near-term situation, based on all those orders that they were pre-ordering just weeks ago, looks like they had to scramble to fill all those solid deals that they were contracted to do.
We've been talking for some time, Rich, about the fact that the U.S. dollar has really lifted up from where it had been maybe a week or so ago. And there has been a little bit of concern maybe about export potential on the, on the beef side and also on the pork side as well as the grains. Right now we see the dollar at last check was actually down a little bit here. But overall, when you look at the bigger picture here, how much impact do you think that realistically could have on our meat exports out of the U.S.?
It probably will be a big issue to look at here. As it stands, this rebound in the U.S. dollar probably is not yet coming near those peaks from just weeks ago. So on this side, we can say it probably does hinder our export potential. But I think right now, just based on the quantity of product we're putting out there from all these protein sources, that we're just simply going to push this product out regardless of the price, possibly.
And one thing we like to keep track of, and we touched on it in our earlier segment here on the grain side, how are the funds set up here on the cattle and hogs?
And as far as the fund issues right now on the cattle, last week they bought about 8,000 contracts of these futures. In fact, that's the best buy to speak of since going back to April of this year here. So very big numbers posted in the past week. Over on the hog side, they did a minor 2,300 contract purchase. Puts it right about 4 weeks in a row of the same type of buying going on for the hogs.
And we were talking right before we came back on live here, right during our break, about the fact you don't want to forget this coming weekend, the time changes. So, spring forward, fall back. That means it's going to get dark earlier in the day for a lot of folks, maybe in that 5 o'clock hour or so. Do you think that'll have any impact on animal production or the meat consumption as well?
It might be something to look at here from maybe a background type of story perspective. Obviously, probably was not a major driver for last week's cash cattle discussion, but regarding the next few weeks, this might be something to look at for some minor changes for demand. Certainly to look at here.
Well, we're just trying to cover all the angles here, Rich. So appreciate the extra help on that. So good to visit with you again. We'll check in again with the Allendale folks here in a little bit. Rich Nelson of Allendale in McHenry, Illinois. Interesting stuff to talk about to kick off the week here, Christina.
All right, thank you, Markets Editor Marlon Bowling.